Dustin is the VP of Sales and Operations at Cambridge Scientific, but actually has been in this field for over a decade, spanning genomics, synthetic biology, translational medicine. You've also hired a ton of people, so we're going to talk about that. You also started in the military. That is unusual, and I love that. So we're going to talk about that transition. I just love that career paths are not linear. They never are. And there's so many ways to get where you're going. So you also founded this 7 Traits Genomics. I want to talk about that too. I didn't actually realize that you're a founder. And you have a school community as well because you are passionate about helping other people be better at selling science. So if anybody is really in this space and wants to learn more, I'm in that community too. Believe it or not, I do a lot of selling in science for my own business development for my recruiting firm. So that's been incredibly helpful. I love the community. With that, I gave a very brief overview, but what do you want to add to that overview? Give us a little walkthrough of your career.
I grew up in a family where neither of my parents went to college. I knew I was going to be a first generation college graduate. I knew from elementary school that I was going to go to college, I was going to become a doctor. They always tell you when you're in school, you got to become a doctor, a lawyer, or a garbage man, and those are the only options, right? It's either professional role or base level. And nothing against those roles whatsoever. I just always knew that I wanted to do something that was on a professional level. And so I set off to become a doctor. When I was in high school, the moment I realized that I wanted to be a doctor, I grew up in the Midwest, out in the middle of the boondocks in the country, in the cornfields, and I was in AP biology, and my biology teacher was a hunter. And he came into class one Monday when he had been hunting that past weekend, and he had a deer heart. And he held it up and he said, "Who wants to help me dissect this deer heart?" And me, I was thinking, oh my gosh, I need to get my hand up because everybody's going to want to do this. And I want to be the first one. So my hand just shot up super fast. And I'm looking around and I'm the only hand that nobody else had any interest in doing that. And I was like, oh, okay, so this is something that's unique. And I'm really driven and felt that pulled for it. So fast forward years later, I joined the military, spent 7 years in the military. I was deployed overseas for 13 months. And, I knew that being a first generation college grad, I would need some help. And my parents weren't going to be the ones to do it, so I had to do it myself. So that's one of the reasons that I joined the military. And so they did help pay for college and to get me to where I am. Outside of that, so I started my career path actually in sales, and I had a really bad experience. It was a distribution company, similar to the role that I'm in now. And at the time, for me, it just was not intellectually stimulating. I couldn't find that merge of science and relationship that I thought would be in that position. And so I couldn't stand it. I got out of it as quick as possible, went back to the drawing board. I said I could still go to med school, I could become a PA, or I could go into research. And while I was doing that, a recruiter actually approached me about a genomics position. I said, "That sounds like sales. I don't want to do that." She said, "Well, let me just explain the role a little bit more to you." And so she did. And as she was talking, okay, what do I need to do to get this job? This is exactly what I need. I think there's something in there that I think is appropriate for this conversation. How important it is as a recruiter or as a hiring manager to really sell the role. You are selling something. And to, I guess, learn about the person that you're selling to, learn about the client, which is the person interviewing, because it may be a good fit. You just have to dig a little deeper, especially if someone who's coming out of the lab or someone who really wanted to be in the science side of it. You have to show them that the business development side isn't not the dark side. It's necessary, and we're all selling at some level. Was with that company for quite some time. That's where I hired a lot of the people. I hired pretty much everyone who entered into that company for actually 7 years, even not ones that weren't on my team, because I was one of the early sales managers. I ended up training and hiring everybody that came in and ended up being a senior salesperson. And then took a journey and learned so much. And through that process, I saw a lot of the things that I thought were being done wrong, things that I could improve on. And I thought, I can do this. I can start my own genomics company. And so I took the leap and I did that. I started out very slow, just doing consulting for projects that the company I was working for could not manage or could not handle. And they had no problems with that. And then, it got to a point where I thought, now I'd like to take on some of the projects that they do handle, but I'm not going to do that while I'm working here. I ended up leaving that company and working for a proteomics company while trying to build my own company. And it was an amazing journey. It was much harder than they tell you. I know everybody says building your own company is difficult and you're not going to get on a sleep. It's much harder than you think. And that's not to discourage anybody. It's also the most satisfying and fulfilling path. Part of the problem that I had was I was doing it while I was trying to work a job. I didn't have a savings built up to just live off of that company. And I didn't get a lot of investments. I was truly, by definition, bootstrapping that company. And the truth is, it did fail, but it didn't fail because trying, definitely number one. Number two, the business model didn't fail. It scaled too fast. I scaled it too fast. I had too many projects coming in. I couldn't manage that many projects at the same time while working a full-time job, the investments to pay for the reagents and to pay my employees. And so it kind of fell apart all at once towards the end. But I learned an unbelievable amount of information that I now take and use in my current business development role, where I'm now running a successful company that's been around for 28 years, and I'm applying those lessons that I learned to this company to take this company to the next level.
That's an incredible story. You make me laugh with the deer heart. I remember dissecting frogs in 6th grade, and I was like the only one who was into it. And
Right.
I bet a lot of people in this community can relate because we're all that weird kid, probably. But you know what? I still love it. That's amazing. Yeah, building a company is no joke. And I know we actually have a couple of entrepreneurs in here, so they should definitely connect with you and maybe you can give them a little pointer or two. That is a nice problem to have scaling too fast. It's better than not scaling. That said, it is a problem.
Yeah, and you don't think about that. You don't
Yeah.
think about being too successful too early. You only think about how can I get more business. When you are scaling a new company, you do need to temper it and
Yeah.
make sure that you're not getting ahead of yourself and make sure that you're planning far out. With that experience too, I also am just not official yet, but I should be tomorrow signing a contract as a consultant on another NGS company. But basically, they had everything that I didn't have. They're only focusing on that. They have a significant investment. They've been around now for 2 years, but they're at a point where they're scientists and they have no idea how to do the business
Yeah.
development side of things. So really excited about that. And I would not be able to do that if I hadn't had that experience.
Yeah, amazing. And I'm so envious of sort of the personality. I want to talk about that a little bit. The personality that you have that gives you the confidence to go out and sell. That's also something that can be cultivated, absolutely, but there's a little bit of innate extrovert in there, I think. And for those people who I know that are in sales that aren't extroverts, it's okay. And it just means that you kind of give yourself a pep talk before you go out. There's a lot of rejection. And I think similar to the podcast that I dropped last Friday, rejection is just data, especially in sales. Like maybe no place even more than in sales, right? You are going to internalize that data all day long.
With just one step closer to a yes, right?
Absolutely. I
You'll
love that.
never learn to like no's, but learn to appreciate them because, like you said, it's data. And when you get a no, you can, if you're comfortable with it, ask why. It's okay to ask. Okay, I understand you don't want to move forward with this. Can I ask why? That's going to give you more information to then next time maybe avoid that, or maybe that was never a shot anyways, and it's nothing you did wrong. They just weren't in a place to buy. It was the wrong buyer. So the lesson you learned there is better processing.
Yeah. Well, and that goes to job seeking as well. A lot of people in here are job seeking and get really upset when they get rejected from their, various applications. And I, on the other side of the table, and you've been there too, sometimes we actually don't even hire anybody for a role, or sometimes the company has changed their direction, or sometimes we were actually hiring somebody internally, but we had to advertise externally.
Yep.
And none of those are a reflection on the candidate pool at all, or, the candidate, our candidates here who say, oh, I got rejected and like, I'm so sad. Right. So there's so much going on behind the scenes, and we definitely want to get into that. I want to talk a little bit first, though, about what is business development in science, because this is not a career path that anybody graduating from any scientific degree actually even knows about. That's not what we do. And so tell us about business development kind of broadly in life sciences. Like, what are the paths?
So typically you would see med tech or devices. So these can be, any type of physical devices. You have services, which are like genomics, where you're selling, someone will send you in their samples, they'll analyze them, give you back data. Could also be CROs that are doing clinical trial development. So they're managing and running your clinical trials for you. And then you have pharmaceutical sales where you're selling a drug to physicians and doctors. So it's very, very diverse based on what your interests are, what your passions are. You also have capital equipment where it's going to be much larger sale, much longer process, and that's going to be more on the business development versus the sales. So if you have very large, long process sales, that's kind of more of a business development role where you're really building relationships and building trust and understanding an entire really company ecosystem and how you can help support that versus just a device sale or a product sale where you're selling one-off products or maybe even repeat products, but it's on a smaller scale. Does that help? Oh, you're muted, Karina.
So many audio problems today. That makes a lot of sense. If people have specific questions about any of those paths, if those are things that you're specifically interested, drop it into the chat and we'll circle back on that. What specifically do you do right now at Cambridge Scientific?
Yeah, so at Cambridge Scientific, I'm the vice president of sales and operations. And so my job coming into the company in January was really to bring it into the 21st century. So the company itself, it's a 28-year-old startup. They've been operating like a startup from the beginning. They're using spreadsheets to manage inventory, to manage projects. They had QuickBooks Desktop, so they couldn't access QuickBooks anywhere but at their computers in the office. Just very, very old school. And so what I've done is bring in new softwares, bring in a CRM, which is a customer resource management tool where you can actually see what you're selling and who you're selling it to and get analysis from that. Bringing in structured sales training for the sales team and really looking at the big picture and how can we bring the company into the next phase in which where we're actually being profitable, not just kind of get going along and paying everybody's salaries. And it's been going very well. And so the company itself, we sell refurbished laboratory equipment. So we buy lab equipment and then we fix it up and we resell it with a warranty for about half the price of what new equipment would be. And this ranges anywhere from pipettes all the way to mass spectrometers. So it's very, very diverse.
Yeah. We were a big customer in grad school. I
Oh, yeah.
remember we had a rep come out pretty often from maybe, well, you wouldn't have been there then, but probably somebody who would work under you who came out
Yeah.
to our lab and kind of was like, what are the pain points? And,
Hmm.
figured out what we needed. And yeah, it was a great cost saving. So that's wonderful when full price equipment is ridiculously expensive.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, and we recently started doing servicing as well. So I came
Oh,
in January, and the company, they said we've been refurbishing our equipment for 28 years, and I'm like, well, why, given the market today, why aren't you fixing other people's? You
yeah.
have the technicians, and so we built out that arm, and that's been hugely successful,
Yeah.
especially with today's market.
I bet. And do you find that those folks that go out and service also play a little bit of a sales role, like
Oh yeah,
identifying what in the
oh
lab
yeah.
maybe.
Yeah, and so that's yeah, exactly. So when they're in the lab, and that's another benefit of going out and doing that
Yeah.
servicing is that now they're in the lab, they can see, oh, hey, you've got this old such and such. Or have you ever thought of replacing that? Or it just comes up, or maybe even that piece of equipment that we went out to service genuinely cannot be fixed, or it would cost
Yeah.
more than to buy a new one or a used one. And so we would then suggest that we would just replace it for this price rather than fixing it for twice the cost.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And we see that function also if you're looking around and you're seeing these, we call them field application scientists, which we touched on. Those folks also have to sell. And that's
Mhm.
kind of part of it. Like, yes, they're going out to be the expert on a certain thing, a certain technology or whatever that's already been sold. But there's always that upselling. There's always looking around and seeing what other problems can you solve. So I want to dive into that a little bit because a lot of people get really nervous about selling. But I have always seen, if it's done well, I've always seen the sales folks that I've worked with as actually partners and
Yes.
almost like problem solvers. So if we could reframe that kind of icky, like, oh, I don't want to sell, what does that actually look like?
Yeah, I completely, and it's funny, before you even started talking, I was already thinking that
we really do need to reframe that because it's not, you're not, I don't sell anything to someone that they don't already want or need. I just help them uncover the fact that they need it. And it's not manipulation. You're a helper. You want to be the, one book to quote is the trusted advisor. You want to be someone that when they think of your lane, in my case, lab equipment, that they think of you. Even if it's something you can't help them with, you find a referral or you build that network out within your industry and you really truly become that subject matter expert. You offer free advice. You're there to help them and support them. And so when they need a piece of equipment or they need a service, you're there to provide that. You're not taking anything from them, you're giving to them. So you just have to kind of think of it that way and ask questions. You'll see it. You'll With the first time you get a client that says, "Oh my God, thank you so much for that," you're like, "Oh, okay, now I get it. I'm not just manipulating them to steal something." That's not what sales is. Not in today's world, not business development. It's more about building a relationship and building trust.
I love that so much. I have a little anecdote there to kind of highlight that, but I was doing a lot of high throughput screening and we did not have a robot in grad school. So I was using these ancient multi-channel pipettes. I still have pipetter's thumb to show for it, my carpal tunnel to this day. And there was a guy just kind of circulating around. I'd seen him around. He was more of a broad sales rep for a lot of different things, but he came over and he saw my ancient pipettes and he said, "Can we run an analysis on those to just see how accurate they are?" And he said, "I have major concerns just based on that model. I know that that's a model that's about 15 years old, and I
Um,
know that." Yeah, he said, "I know that they're historically don't hold their accuracy." And so we ran the test and it was atrocious. And so I was able to take that to my PI and go, "Look, this is why our data is not consistent." And, we did end up upgrading and buying a better set. And like, what a difference. I remember like writing him a little thank you note. It was
yep.
such a game changer for me. And
Wow.
I was a junior grad student. I really didn't know any better. So he was really an advisor to me. Anyway, little story. Still think very fondly of him. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about what's great and what is maybe not so great about your career. And then I want to turn it over to questions shortly. But what do you love most? And what do you really kind of dread in your day to day?
Yeah, so I what I love most is networking. I absolutely love connecting people, even if it's not for me personally. In fact, probably even better if I can connect two people and they can succeed and they can get something out of that relationship. I mean, that is the epitome for me. I'm so obsessed with science and that all if I could just talk about science all day with these, next week or not, is it 2 weeks I get to meet George Church and talk to him all day about science and the dean of Harvard Medicine. Like that to me is like you can't beat that. And so I guess that you just the science being able to go into these labs with authority and be able to talk to them in these companies and have that, backing of Cambridge Scientific to have access to these people that otherwise I wouldn't have. That's my favorite part about the company, about the business. Things that I don't like are I am very much undiagnosed ADD. I do not like monotonous tasks. I cannot stand, and I'm the guy now saying, update your CRM, update your Salesforce, make sure you put everything. I hate doing that. I absolutely cannot stand it. I don't like having repetitive meetings, the weekly meeting. This is literally my job that I have to do. I can't stand that stuff, but it has to be done. It's extremely important. I know that. So I do it and the results show, but for me, it's something I have to force myself to do.
Yeah, I hear you on that. Same, same. Amazing. What personality traits do you think are really important for somebody going into this field?
So as a hiring manager, the innate features that I look for, personality traits I look for are number one, a passion for science and a passion for helping people. If you have those, I can teach you everything else. Those are things you can't teach, you can't force on somebody. So when I see those, I automatically think, okay, this person has the baseline what I need. And then I look for initiative, drive. One thing I will tell people here who are applying for a business development role, especially if you don't have sales experience, that's okay. Do not be afraid to say, I want to make money. Because that hiring manager for a sales position wants to hear you say that. It's
Mhm.
okay. It's not taboo.
Interesting. I really like that. So we talked about what they can cultivate, which is just the hard skills, right? You need to learn how
Mhm.
to do sales, and that's going to be different per company because every company is going to have
Right.
a little bit of a different take on that. So I think a little bit of mental flexibility if you're going to move from company to company. And then let's see, what mistakes do you see that people make when they're just too focused on maybe being nice or whatever?
Yeah, so if you're into sales books, one of the top 10 I would say in my book is the Challenger Sale. And in that they break down, I think it's 5 or 6 core sales methods or sales personality types, and they give it to you and they ask you what do you think is the going to be the most successful. And outside of the Challenger, because that's the name of the book, you wonder and you listen to it, and I say, and I've said that business development is relationship building, right? It's very important, but guess which one is the least successful? It's the relationship builder. And it's because you give. It's a person that focuses exclusively on building the relationships, because if you give too much, then you don't get. A good relationship is give and get. So you have
Mhm.
to be able to have the strength to challenge the customer and ask them to give as well. And that's what makes a good relationship. That's what makes you feel good about the relationship, and you want to continue to that, and you want to give more. But if both people are giving, that's a great solid relationship.
Sounds
Can't
like a
boil.
really good book. So we'll try and I'll pull it out of the transcript and drop it
Yeah.
for anyone thinking about that. Okay, so let's talk about hiring a little bit more. What on a resume really, sorry, what on a resume really jumps out at you that like pulls you into, a resume and makes you think, "Oh, I want to talk to this person."
Yeah, so I think what pulls on me from resumes is when their personality comes out. So you look at, and you look at all these resumes, I mean hundreds, thousands of resumes, and they all start to look the same.
Yep.
And it you if you can just, number one, if you can tailor it to that position, that shows that you have that initiative, that you actually care. You're not just throwing your resume out into the void. You focused on, I want to be hired at this company for this job for X, Y, and Z for these reasons. You can, as a hiring manager, you can see when someone's tailored their resume versus when it's just a generic resume. Make your resume counterintuitively about the company and about the job, not about you. Tailor
Yeah.
your skill set to that job. But if you don't, it's just going to look like every single other resume that they're looking at. Everybody knows what the keywords are. Everybody knows what the key skill sets are because I gave it to you in the job description. Put it in there if it's truly a skill. There's lots of ways to do that. So that's typically, personality, and then did they tailor it? The other thing is, do this. I don't know if people are telling, I don't know if it's a lazy thing or if people are telling you not to do it. Make a cover letter.
Oh
Please
yeah.
make a cover letter, because it it will set you apart. Nobody's doing it. So if you do it, you're already 10 steps ahead of everybody else. And it's so easy. One paragraph.
Yeah, I love that. We have all of the templates here free for anybody to grab. It's not difficult. And yes, I agree with all of those things. What's really interesting is the with the tools we have right now to be able to tailor resumes. I provide a whole set of ChatGPT prompts. I provide training and all of that. But anybody who's sort of using ChatGPT should be able to kind of cobble that together and at least tailor a little bit. And it's shocking that I look at hundreds of resumes a week and maybe 2% are tailored for the job, maybe.
Yep.
And it's not that hard. To your point, it's like an open book test. Like we gave you the job description,
Yeah.
right? And there are bad job descriptions out there that don't give you a lot of insight. The best ones, the ones I'm excited about, have a little of the personality of the company. They really talk about the mission so that you can align yourself with that mission. And I think uniquely for sales jobs, sales and marketing kind of go hand in hand. So you have an eye for that as well. I would say about half the hiring managers I work with want a cover letter and they're disappointed if they don't have one. But that probably jumps to 100% if you're applying to sales roles. So
Yeah.
don't sleep on that. Okay, amazing. I love all of that. What transferable skills do you see playing really well for scientists?
Yeah. So, big ones are, if you're coming from the lab, number one, you've got the lab experience. So, I guess to go back to the foundations of a business development role in the life sciences, this is a unicorn. For someone to have science expertise in a specific area, because most of them are going to want it in that specific area, and have business development experience, it's very hard, especially at an entry level. So you run into this catch 22. How do I get experience without a job? But how do I get a job without experience? And so you have to lean on your transferable skills. The science, most of the people we're talking to right now, I think, have the science background. So
Mhm.
that's good. You're covered there. It's the business development or the sales experience that you might struggle with. It's real easy. If you've had a restaurant job, a hospitality job, if you've worked at Walmart, anywhere that you've talked with customers, you have customer service experience. If you've volunteered, if you were in 4-H, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, you have experience working with a team. So you just have to look at those transferable skills that you've already experienced and had, and just put them and look at them from the lens of a sales manager's perspective.
I love that. For all of you non-farm kids out here, 4-H is a farm organization.
Love 4-H. Sorry.
I was in not 4-H, but Future Farmers of America.
FFA? Love FFA.
FFA. Yes, and I raised chickens and showed horses.
Nice.
So, yes, all of those things are absolutely great. I want to lean on the volunteering because we get a lot of people right now who are maybe out of work or they're finishing a postdoc or a PhD or they don't have any kind of formal work experience, maybe besides some summer jobs earlier. Volunteering is so cool. You you will find no shortage of organizations who will love to have you. There are a couple, and maybe I'll make a list for the community, but there are organizations that reach out to me all the time to ask for help doing things. And so if you volunteer on their membership committee, let's just say, well, that's great sales experience because membership committees are always renewing memberships and trying to keep people and all of that. If you volunteer on the events committee, that's also great because you're going to be working with vendors and you're going to be negotiating contracts and you're going to be working with a membership. I mean, there's so many transferable skills there.
Yeah, and I like the events one too, because if you're volunteering on, let's say, a vendor show or a
Yeah.
networking event, now you're also getting to network, and you're doing it from a point of authority. Where if you're just going to attend, especially if you don't have a lot of experience, you're probably going to be nervous. If you're
Oh, yeah.
not really outgoing, you're just going to sit there. You might talk to one person who's also looks nervous and scared, but you're not going to go out and network. But if you're coming there from a volunteer, they're all going to want to talk to you. They're going to have questions for you, and you have more confidence. So I'll tell just a real quick story that I heard
Yeah.
from Les Brown on this topic that just gives me chills. He's a motivational speaker, and he said there was this. I don't know if it's a true story or just a story, but there were two gentlemen who were working for the same company. They were both laid off. The company went under, and they had no jobs. And so they went out and they were both job searching. At some point, one of them gave up. He went home, he sat on his couch, he ate a bunch of food, he drank, he fought with his wife, complained about his life, and didn't do anything about it. The other guy kept going, and he went out and he could not find a job. So eventually he went to a company and he said, "Listen, I have the skill sets that you need. I know you don't have a place for me, but let me just volunteer and work here and do what I can and show you what I can do." And he did. And guess what? 2 months later, one of the guys at that company was let go, and they looked around and they said, "Well, who can do this job?" Well, he's been doing this job for the last 2 months, and he got the job
Yeah.
because he went out and he volunteered and he pushed himself.
Yeah, I love that. We've shared a few stories like that. That's how I got an internship that I really needed and wanted. I went and worked unpaid and they realized I was doing a good job and they found the money. And there are several people in here who are looking for, experience in labs. A lot of labs right now in academic institutions would take you as a volunteer, as an
Mm-hmm.
intern.
Yep.
And yeah, it would be unpaid. And it would be building your resume, and you never know because if they find a little scrap of funding, they're gonna feel guilty and they're gonna wanna give you give you a little bit of money. I
Yep.
love all of that. That's so, so impactful. There's a real stigma in the last couple of years of working for free. And I would argue that most of the really good opportunities I've had, I've started volunteering, and I do so much pro bono work for startup companies because they can't afford to hire anybody. Therefore, they can't actually hire my company until they've gotten funding. And part of getting funding is presenting who's going to do the work and how much is it going to cost. So I do tons of board slides just on that. And I do that for free.
And
I'm
it and
sure.
it probably doesn't always pay off, but
No.
If you don't do it, none of it will happen. If you
Yeah.
do it, some of it will, and that
Yeah.
covers the ones that don't. And also, you're gaining
Absolutely.
experience by doing that. You're building a portfolio, and you're gaining. Because another thing with this industry that everybody should know, people move around.
Oh yeah.
People move around. So if you make these, build this network, you meet this CFO, guess what? In 2 years, he might be the CEO of a
Mhm.
major company. And then you just give him a call and, hey, remember when I helped you out? And it
Oh,
just,
yeah.
that's how it works.
Yeah, that is networking in a nutshell. It is not, I always think of it as like a piggy bank. Every day you just put a little coin in the piggy bank, as many coins as you can. And that doesn't add up to a lot today, but it does in the future. Like that
Yep.
piggy bank is going to be absolutely busting in a few
Yep.
years. Okay, great. Compensation. I just want to touch on that. And then we have a couple of questions from the audience. How does compensation work in business development? It is totally different than other roles.
Oh yeah. Yep. So it's definitely, and it's different per company and per, type of role. For example, capital equipment, you're going to have a base pay that's going to be different than a small sale equipment. So in business development, typically you're going to have your base pay, which is going to be your annual salary broken up either biweekly or monthly or weekly. So you get paid that regularly, and that's a flat rate. Then you'll have either a commission or a
Mhm.
bonus structure. And these could be all different ways. It could be anywhere from 1% to 20%. It just depends on what you're selling and what the margins are on their end, and then what your base is. So that also, so you could have a low base and a high commission if it's a high rate of sale, or if they want to push you to make more sales, or if it's an established company like Thermo Fisher, they're probably going to have a bigger base pay and a smaller commission or more likely a bonus structure. So commission is paid out on per sale, per item usually, and then bonus structure will be paid out based on milestones, and that's usually a percentage of your salary or a random number that they pick that they think will motivate you to have more sales. And so that would be, you sell 5 instruments, you get a $5,000 bonus, or versus commission, you sell $5,000 worth of equipment and you get 10%, so you get 500. So it just depends on what the company does, but it can be very different.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, that's really confusing, but that comes back to why you said that hiring managers want to know that you want to make money, because a lot of
Hmm.
the time that's going to actually influence your performance because you can make more
Yeah.
if you're better and harder working.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And it shows the hiring manager that you have a confidence in yourself if you're able to say, I'm okay taking a smaller base pay, but I want a higher commission, which can pay off a lot more for you if you're confident that you can sell these items. And that's going to come with a lot of experience to be able to know that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Tell us about a couple of different types of roles. Like where would you start as an entry level and how do you progress and what does that look like?
Yeah, so starting as entry level, it really depends on what. I guess inside sales would be a nice place to start, especially if you're coming out of the lab, if you're a little more introverted and you're nervous about going out into the field. Although, me, I mean, maybe I'm extroverted. I don't know. I go back and forth sometimes.
Mhm.
But I like going out into the field and meeting people and talking to them. But there's always the inside sales role where you're stationary. Typically nowadays it's remote. It could be in an office, but you're basically just emailing and phone calling people. Now Zoom calling people. And so you don't actually go out into the field and physically meet with people. Does not mean that you're not talking to people though, just to be clear, because some people think that it's just, like a call center, but you're still going to be talking to people, you're still going to be making orders, and you're still going to be making sales. The difference is you're just not going out into the field. So that's typically a good starting point, and to get a sense of, do I really like selling? Am I okay with doing this? Do I know enough about the company, about the software, or about the products? And from there you would then grow into an outside sales role, and then you would start potentially moving into management if that's something you want to pursue.
Yeah, interesting. And what are BDRs? And is that something that scientists ever are?
So BDR, business development representative, would be more, this would be probably like bigger scale, bigger picture. So this would be a company wanting to either merge with another company
Mhm.
or have these larger partnerships. So you might have just typically very large contracts. This is going to be on a higher scale. You're likely going to have a good amount of experience under your belt in order to have that type of a role. It's definitely not going to be an entry level role because you have to know the industry in and out. You have to have contacts. Usually, if somebody's hiring you as a BDR, it's because you're bringing. You might even just be bringing one specific account that
Uh,
flagship. You have a great relationship with flagship, so we're literally going to hire you to gain that relationship.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's really interesting. Different companies, different sizes of companies and stages of companies are going to have a different type of business development set up. So, a baby biotech, like
Hmm.
where they're maybe just thinking about licensing and
Yeah.
making connections in the industry, that's typically just going to be like a one person
That's
operation. Is that right?
yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. So, and I had one of those roles actually. I think they call me corporate something manager. I don't know, but
Yeah.
yeah. It's so for the really small baby startups, that's going to be you're essentially the CFE, the chief of effing everything. You're in charge. You're the only go-to guy or gal. And
Yeah.
you do everything from marketing to investor decks to some of the science even. I mean, those are very any small startup that you're in, you're gonna wear multiple hats. There's no way around it, which is can be very exciting for some people. It is for me. I like doing that.
Yeah. That's probably not gonna be where you start your career in this
Yeah,
because
yeah,
you're gonna be hiring somebody who's really kind of been there, done that
yeah,
because they need to swap those hats fast and be efficient.
yep, yeah, exactly.
And bring the network, kinda to your point, those baby companies, at least every time I've hired somebody into those roles for my baby companies, we wanna know where their network is because
Yep.
we wanna instantly leverage their connections.
The thing with startups, and this is something some startups don't seem to know, and this is why you see in the news such and such startup is closing, they failed. It's because in the startup world, you have to move fast, like really fast. And
Yeah.
if you don't, you're going to fail and you're going to run out of money. And they get a lot of these startups, they get this money right off the bat, some non-diluted funding or, an investor, and they pour this money in. Could be 10 million, 300 million I've seen as much as, and then they run through it. They run
Yeah.
through it 'cause they don't know what they're doing. They want to buy everything new, and then suddenly the money's gone.
Mm.
You don't want to be in that situation. You have to move fast, really
Yeah.
fast.
And then a bigger company where they're building out like multi tiers, let's say, like what stage, I guess I'll rephrase, what stage company would folks here maybe start to look for an entry level role?
Entry level role, I mean, I would go to mid to large size because there's just going to be a lot more flexibility. You're going to have a designated role, a very specific role, a task that you know what you need to do. It's really easy. Someone's already been there, done that. You get to learn the lingo, you get to learn the technology. They're going to have training programs, they're going to have onboarding programs, HR.
Mm.
They're going to have great healthcare benefits, whereas a startup's going to have terrible benefits for the most part. And again, not to discourage anybody from doing startups, I love that environment. But as an entry level, you're much safer going to the biggest company you can find.
Mhm.
But
I
you're
would
not going
agree.
to make an impact. That's the difference, and that's where I get drawn to the startups. Is I
Mhm.
like to make an impact. I like to direct, help with the direction of the company. With a big company, don't even try to change this one form on Salesforce. It's never going to happen. Like
Mm.
you have a role, you fill it. It's just like working in the lab. You have a role, you fill it, and you either succeed or you don't. Much different.
So a good place to get trained, but
Yeah.
maybe
Oh yeah,
once
yeah.
you
Yep.
move on to something more high impact later.
Yep.
One thing we didn't talk about here before I move, I did want to talk about moving up and how that affects your pay. You did mention that
Hmm.
moving into management isn't always more money in your line of work.
Yes. So in life science business development, moving into management is almost always going to be a pay cut in a lot of ways. Number one, you're giving up all or some of your commission. Most likely, if you get commission, it's probably a small startup company and it'll probably be you get a percent of your whole team's commission. You probably won't, though. Chances are 9 times out of 10, you'll be moving to a bonus structure, which is tied to your team. It's tied not only now to your individual contributions, but to your team's contributions, which is much harder to achieve and
Mhm.
prove, but doesn't mean you can't do it. But your base pay will go up, but again, you're losing all that commission.
Mm.
And if commission is 40% of your actual full package pay, which it typically is once you've been in for 2 or 3 years, which is when you'd be moving into management, you're losing that much of your pay and you're not getting that much of a promotion. But it's an investment in you, because you're going to do that role. And this is one thing I want to mention before too. One piece of advice that someone gave me was, you will be in, if you're in a role for more than 2 to 3 years and you haven't been promoted or moved on to another company, you're doing something wrong. And that's in today's world. Back in the day, you'd work for a company for 25 years and retire and everybody was happy. That is not the case today. If you're stagnant for more than 2 to 3 years, you're doing something wrong. And so, given that, you what you want to do is gain that experience and then move to another role where you do get a 20 to 30% bump in pay. And it may be, probably most likely, with another company.
That makes sense. Yeah. A lot of folks, and I have 3 friends who went to grad school with me. They were all, it was just so obvious they were going to go into business development. There's just there is a phenotype. They were outgoing. They were always planning all the parties and doing all the things, right? And they're still account executives, and
Yep.
they make a lot of money doing that. But, looking at how many years of experience they have, if you were in a more traditional biotech role, like they would be senior director, maybe VP by now. Like, you definitely, I understand why they're doing it. They're probably making tons of money. And you're right, they do change jobs every maybe 2 to 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's just what I call normal sales within
Yeah.
the life sciences. But then you have pharma too, where it's just,
Mm.
that's a whole different world. So anybody who's interested, I don't think the people on this call are probably likely to go into pharma sales. It's not your typical scientist role. It's
Yeah.
more, I call it schmoozy, but it's a very volatile
Yeah.
environment. You will be unemployed at some point, and it's not going to be your fault at all. Either the company goes under, they're done with that drug, the patent runs out. Like, it's just not, people are laid off annually from pharma
Mhm.
companies regularly.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, I don't think we have any folks on here, but if you are thinking that, feel free to drop in the chat. I'm going to switch over to a couple of quick questions here.
Okay.
So let's see. Micah has a question about job titling. So she's looking to move into sort of startup world, which we just talked about might be a little bit difficult as an entry level person, not impossible, but looking for pharma or med tech. So pharma, so when we think about startups, I don't typically think of pharma as startups. Those I typically think of as the commercialization engine that,
Hmm.
sits on the back of biotech, but medtech definitely. And that's a little bit of a different beast because we've built out a huge sales team for a relatively early stage medtech company. Those can go to commercialization and need sales teams quite quickly. So that's a good place to look. What types of job titles, and just kind of throw out a list of things that you've seen, because every company calls them something different.
Yeah, there's a ton of names for the same role:
Yeah.
account executive, business development manager, even regional sales manager. There's so many different titles that just mean really the same thing. The best way to determine what the role is, number one, look at the job description. Number two, just ask the right questions during the interview. So ask, what is my role going to be? How am I going to be successful in this role? Will I be managing a team, or will I be an individual contributor? Things like that will help you know more about what the role is than the title. Titles
Yeah.
don't do much for me. And I've had
Yeah.
companies, literally the company I'm working for right now said, name your title. What do you want? And I'm like, well, I want chief commercial officer, but I think it would be crazy to go from director of sales to chief commercial officer. So let's go with VP for now.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That's really funny. We already talked about transferable skills, which is the second part of our question. But in her case, I remember that she has worked as sort of she's sort of been on the innovation side. So she was thinking like innovation scout. That almost sounds to me like a liaison or alliance manager. There are titles around there where maybe you work with academic institutions and things like that. Those are only going to be found in larger companies. We never find those in startups.
Yeah, those are so. I mean, I mentioned what I would love to do. That would be my ideal role. I would love
Yeah.
to do something like that. I would say I'm not even in a position where I would be able to do that yet. Most of the people you see in those roles will probably have a lot of wrinkles.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Not to dissuade you on that, but I saw your question in the group, and I would say get the experience first. Let someone else pay you to train you. Build your network, go to as many networking events as you can, talk to as many people as you can, be outgoing, make sure people know your name and know who you are and think of you in the sector that you want to be in.
Mhm.
And then I would probably do that. I would not try to find a role for that. I would either just keep grinding until you get to that point, which will be many, many years from now. Or what you could do to expedite it is start your own consulting agency and
Mm.
do it that way and find a way to monetize that. I agree, Karina. I don't know that those roles would be able to be filled without an obnoxious amount of experience.
Obnoxious amount. I like that. Good answer. All right. I'm going to run through somebody's career path because they are wondering what, if you were in their shoes, you would communicate, how you would communicate their transferable skills. So, PhD in chemical engineering, immunology background, 25 years teaching at the college level. So, scientific communication, curriculum design, mentoring, 10 years in corporate engineering, cross functional collaboration, compliance, and 15 years as a patient advocate for neurological diseases. So he's looking to move into like the MSL space, maybe something like that. How would you, what jumped out at you about that career that, or that path that he should definitely highlight?
Yeah, so I think you have a nice round amount and an area of expertise and experience. So leveraging that, making sure that you're communicating that in a way that bolsters whatever the job description is for that role, because you've been there. You've not only have you done it and experienced it, but you've taught it. There's no better way to learn something than to teach it, in my experience, because when you teach something, you learn the gaps. You might think you know a topic or an area, but until you teach it, you don't know the gaps that you have, because your students will give you those. They'll ask the right questions and tell you that, oops, I didn't know that. And then that forces you to dive deeper. After 15 years, or was it 25 years doing that? 15 or 20,
Yeah.
either one, 15 or 25 years of doing that, you've probably filled all the gaps. So you have that. Then you have the commercial experience. So you have, you understand the industry. I think you're in a very good spot to leverage those skills. And, I'd be happy to go through your resume and your experience one by one, and help you kind of re-communicate that in a way that would bolster that new resume.
That's very generous. Thank you. Okay, next question. So let's see, what percentage of time do you think BD typically spends on scouting tech versus contract negotiations and things like that?
Yeah, so general rule, about 60% prospecting. You need to be prospecting every single day. The big thing about business development is inexperienced salespeople will do is they'll prospect right off the bat because they have nothing else to do. They'll do 100% prospecting. They're going to get a bunch of leads. They're going to start answering those leads, and then they're going to stop prospecting. And what
That's
happens
what I
is,
do.
you can't do that, Karina. Bad. You have to prospect every day. You have to set aside time, not every week, every day, to do prospecting. Because what happens then is you're going to see these ebbs and flows. Because it takes, depending on your industry, it could be anywhere from 3 weeks to 3 years to go through, to go through an entire sales process. It just depends on what your industry is and what you're selling. But let's say in my experience, in my industry, it's 3 to 6 months to close a deal. So if I prospect today, I would expect to close those deals in 3 to 6 months. So if I'm prospecting for this entire month, I'm good in 3 to 6 months for 1 month. But if I stop, I'm not going to know that it's not working until 3 to 6 months from now.
Ooh,
And
that's
then all of
good.
a sudden, I'm like, where are all the deals? I'm going to go prospect again. And then guess what? 3 to 6 months later, now I've got more deals coming in. And then I do
Yeah.
the same thing. Most inexperienced salespeople will do that, and they just have these ebbs and flows, versus if you, no matter what, no matter how much, how many projects you have, you keep prospecting, you keep filling that funnel, filling that pipeline, you'll have consistent growth.
Yeah. I want to just translate that to job searching because I would say a lot of people don't have any interviews. So what do? You go apply all day and then you get some interviews and then you stop applying because you're trying to
Yeah.
prepare for the interviews. And then I see this cycle happening right here in the community as well. People are like, oh, I have 3 interviews. Maybe they work out great. If not, then you're back to square one. You don't have anything else in your pipeline.
Keep
So
applying. Yep.
love
Keep
it. We're
applying.
all salespeople here. You're just selling yourself.
And you never know, honestly, and this is coming from this with this company, we like to hire like right away.
Yeah.
If it's a good person, we'll have them in here within a week if we can. Other
Awesome.
companies, Thermo Fisher, it's going to take you like 2 to 3 months to go through their process before you even have an opportunity,
Yeah.
and so, it's just it's a different process, but you have to just keep applying. I agree.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay, next question here. When I collaborated with business development at my former company, it seemed like a lot of their time was spent in contracts and negotiations and writing NDAs. So she's saying that doesn't sound very fun. How much of that do you do?
It's not it's not fun, and I do a lot of that. Sorry, hold on. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry, I picked up my headphone, just fumbling with my ADD. But no, that too much time doing that. I do not like it. It depends on the company, the size of the company. Larger companies, you don't have to do that. That's another
Mm.
benefit to just starting out and going into those larger companies. That'll all be handled by the legal department.
Oh,
You
yeah.
don't have to touch on that stuff. But the smaller the company, the more of that you're going to have to do. It's just an unnecessary evil. But yeah, I definitely spend far too much time doing that stuff right now.
Yeah, and for a little context there, when I'm thinking about how I build out small companies, we typically have maybe like a CBO, chief business officer or equivalent that's doing stuff, but we also have hired legal at that point too.
Yeah.
And so we're usually hiring that person. And then we also will usually hire a contracts person that just sits under legal, just doing contracts. And so,
Yeah.
yes, they work very closely with the BD team, but that usually is handed off.
Yeah, you really, if you want to be successful, you really have to do that. Because if your BD person is spending that much time doing those contracts, they're not selling. And then
Yeah.
again, you're going to run into that, you know, ebb and flow.
Yeah, absolutely. The next question is a lot of people in the community want to make a career change, like from the bench to commercial. And since you've done that, how do you evaluate somebody's adaptability, readiness to learn? Let's say, I'm going to paraphrase this a little bit, but they've been in a traditional research role, not coming straight out of academia, and they want to make that pivot.
Yeah. So big thing is, so you're asking for advice on how I would as a hiring manager or as
As a
a,
hiring manager, how are you evaluating somebody's career change if they've started on this path and now they want to go over here?
yeah. So really, then it just comes down to personality and how do you approach, if you're coming in prepared for the interview and you've tailored your resume, that shows me that you're adaptable already. And that's where it comes back to: make your cover letter, make sure you tailor your resume, make sure you practice the interview questions. That's your first opportunity to sell.
Yeah.
Coming from the bench, your interview is your first opportunity to show the hiring manager that you can sell, because you're selling yourself. You're selling them on hiring you for that job. So show them I have the transferable skills. By the end of the interview, you're going to want to hire me. And that shows you how I'm going to treat your customers.
Love that. Yep. I talk about that a lot when we're talking about resumes. Whenever there's a typo on a resume or it looks disorganized, you are telling me without telling me that you're not an organized person and your attention to detail is crap. And
Mm-hmm.
that is we our resume is the only impression that we get to make at the beginning of the process. And so having it look nice, be tailored, tell me you're organized without telling me you're organized, right? That's how we do it. Awesome. Any wrap up thoughts? We are almost at time here, and this was so amazing. We could talk all day, but I think we got through most of the questions.
Yeah, no, I would just say, just remember that you're already halfway there. As someone who's hired in the life science, business development, and sales, I'm always looking for people who have both the science and the business development experience, but I know and understand that that's very unlikely. So you're halfway there having the science. That's the harder thing. You already went to college, you already got the training. I can't put someone through college who has sales experience, but I can put them through a sales training program. So keep that in mind. Focus on your transferable skills, be positive, be likable, and you'll be just fine.
Amazing. Well, all of these was great. Thank you so much for your time. As I mentioned, Dustin does have a community where he just works with people on being better at doing all of this. Do you have some career changers in there that are kind of,
Oh yeah. Oh,
yeah,
so we had a founders call with 40 people, and every single one of them came from research, came from the bench
amazing.
or directly out of college, planning to go into life sciences, not life sciences sales.
Well,
Most of us planned on going into med school. And then we just real world happened, and here we are.
That's amazing. Well, I can tell you from experience, the group is great. And anybody who wants to make some good connections, I think that's a good place to do it as well. Dustin's in our group as well. But for now, we'll leave it there. And thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Sounds good. Thank you, Karina. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
See you.